Hello again. As the other videos on Mark explained, we are going through the Gospel of Mark, one chapter a week. And I'm just kind of taking some time to go through some of the chapters and some of the verses that really stand out to me and just kind of reflecting and commenting on them. And even though this is the second week, we're going to finish off a story from chapter one because it's just so important. So today we're going to be talking about the cleansing of the leper. Jesus cleanses a man and sends him off. So I'm just going to read it really quick from Mark 1, verses 40 through 45. A leper came to Jesus begging him, and kneeling down, he said, "If you choose, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I do choose. Be made clean." Immediately, the leprosy left him and he was made clean. After sternly warning him, Jesus sent the man away at once, saying, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and make offerings for their cleansing as Moses commanded as a testimony to them." But the man went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the word, so that Jesus could no longer go into the towns openly, but had to stay in the country. And people came to him from every quarter. So I just want to make a couple observations. The first one is that the man came and didn't ask to be healed, he asked to be cleansed. And this is a really important kind of distinction for us. Certainly, the man did want to be healed, but the idea of cleansing is that with leprosy, he was socially and even spiritually excluded from communion with people in his village and worship in the temple or even the synagogues. And so being unclean was not just a physical problem, it was a social and spiritual issue. Uh, and this was really kind of one of the worst things that could happen to a person. And the word unclean also should make us think about the unclean spirits. So the unclean man is like the unclean spirits that Jesus had already cast out earlier in the chapter. The unclean spirits in the synagogue in Capernaum had been interrupting Jesus as he was preaching and teaching. And so we get this sense that physical healing and spiritual deliverance are part of the same ministry for Jesus. And even the key words that are used make us think that this healing of this unclean man functions a lot like an exorcism of evil spirits. There's talking about how Jesus immediately cast out. And so this idea that the leprosy left him, it's really this, it was driven out the way evil spirits are being driven out from people or different places and being sent out. And so it's very combative the way that the story is told for Mark. And so there's this sense in which unclean spirits and unclean physical ailments are part of the problem with humanity. And this problem really is death, is that Jesus has come to overcome sin and death, and that his purpose is to, as we'll hear later in chapter 3, to bind the strong man and to rescue the people. Jesus came to uh, ransom himself to rescue other people. So Jesus comes to have victory over death, physical healing, and spiritual deliverance. But partly what that means is for that to really happen is Jesus takes all of our sin and all of our pain and all of our sickness onto himself. And we get this in the story itself. I talked last time in the earlier video about how there's really this geography of discipleship that goes on in Mark, and you get the same thing here, is that a man comes to Jesus, and this man, because he was unclean, had to live in the countryside, in the wilderness. He comes to Jesus and he's made clean, which means he can go into the city. He is made righteous. He now can participate in community. But what happens to Jesus is Jesus was in the cities and ministering to the cities, but now there's such a ruckus. He is in the countryside. He is in the wilderness. No longer could Jesus go into any town openly, but stayed out in the country, says verse 45. And this is really on a real kind of specific level in the story. It's an example of what Jesus does for us is he takes our place in the wilderness. He takes on all the sin and suffering. He who has no sin became sin for us so that we could become the righteousness of Christ. So even in this story, at the end of Mark chapter 1, we're getting uh, themes and allusions to what will happen eventually on the cross and in the resurrection, that Jesus will take care of all the things that cause us death. and that his ministry is spiritual deliverance as well as physical healings. And they're really two sides of the same coin. And the coin is that the kingdom of God has come near, as it was announced in Mark 1:14. So that brings us up to date on chapter 1. The next video will start on chapter 2.